Eva Coleman had spent 3 years learning how to be invisible. In the glossy steel and glass tower of Titan Tech, invisibility was survival. Every night, she pushed her squeaky cleaning cart down the marble hallways of the top floor, a gray shadow among giants. Her uniform blended with the walls. Her footsteps were silent on the expensive carpet. Her job was simple: polish, dust, wipe, vanish. Do it well, and no one noticed you existed. But tonight, something felt different. She moved around the CEO's sprawling penthouse office, the city skyline twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Titan Tech's headquarters pierced the clouds like a sword, a monument to power. Eva wiped the mahogany conference table with slow, practiced circles, catching glimpses of herself in the polished surface, a ghostly reflection of someone who once had dreams. Dreams of becoming a lawyer. Dreams that had died the day she lost her job at Marshall & Brooks, one of the city's most prestigious law firms. She had been too good at noticing things, they said, too sharp for her own good. A sudden voice shattered the silence. Window streaks again. Richard Carlton snapped. Titan Tech CEO stood in the doorway, 6'2", silver-haired, and dressed like a luxury watch advertisement. His eyes flicked across the room like he owned the air itself. "What do we pay you for?" "Exactly?" Afa straightened, her hands instinctively clasping the cloth. "I'll take care of it right away, sir." Richard barely looked at her as he strode to his desk. His Tom Ford suit was worth more than her monthly rent. He dropped a thick folder onto the table, sending papers sliding onto the floor, and cleaned that up. "The Halvix people will be here in an hour. Everything needs to be perfect." "Yes, sir," Eva said softly. She knelt to gather the scattered pages. It was a reflex, now quiet, quick, unnoticed. But as her fingers brushed the paper, a fragment of legal language caught her eye. She froze. "Intellectual property rights shall be transferred upon merger completion." Her pulse quickened. She had seen this kind of clause before. Back when she worked in legal, she had drafted similar contracts, but something about the wording felt off. The language was buried, almost invisible, exactly the kind of trap meant to go unnoticed. Her eyes flicked to the bottom corner. The document read version B strange. Multi-million-dollar contracts almost never had multiple public versions, without clear labeling. A memory surfaced like a ghost. Her old boss, Thomas Marshall, leaning over her shoulder 5 years ago. "Your attention to detail is impeccable, Eva. Most people wouldn't have caught that discrepancy." She shook the memory away as Richard's voice cut through the air again. "Today, not tomorrow," he barked, snatching the documents from her hands. "Yes, sir," she whispered, lowering her gaze. The elevator chimed. Julian Parker, Titan Tech's head of security, entered first, a broad-shouldered man with a calm presence. He nodded at Eva with the faintest smile. One of the few people in this building who saw her as more than furniture. "All clear, Mr. Carlton," he said as he stepped aside to reveal Halvix's executive team. Grant Holloway walked in like he owned the world. Sleek charcoal suit, hair slicked back, eyes sharp with calculation. He smiled wide, but it never touched his eyes. 3 associates followed, all carrying black leather portfolios. Richard Grant said warmly, spreading his arms. "The day has finally come." Eva kept her head down as she wiped the windows, but her ears were open. "The merger of the decade," Richard said, shaking his hand. $100 million is just the beginning." "Yes," Grant replied, his tone smooth as silk. "Titan Tech's hardware, Halvix's software together will rewrite the rules." Eva moved silently, her cloth gliding over the glass. But every instinct in her body screamed that something was wrong. Grant's eyes flicked around the room constantly, assessing everything, as though every detail was part of some invisible chessboard. For the next hour, she hovered in the background, emptying bins that didn't need emptying, straightening chairs that were already perfect. No one noticed her. No one ever did. But as she passed the table, her eyes darted toward the contract. There it was again, version B. Something in her gut twisted. Ava's hands trembled slightly as she rearranged the stack of papers. She had no right to be reading anything, but she couldn't shake the unease curling in her gut. The memory of her old job haunted her. She had loved the rhythm of it, the precision. She had been good at catching what others missed. But here she was, cleaning windows while billionaires carved up empires around her. Eva. She flinched slightly at the sound of her name. It was Julian, the head of security. He stood in the doorway, scanning the room as the Halvik's team laughed and drank sparkling water with Richard. "You okay?" he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "Just a long night," she said, managing a faint smile. He nodded, then moved aside as Grant Holloway approached Richard with a thin, shark-like grin. "Richard, I believe we're ready for tomorrow. Once the ink is dry, Titan Tech will step into a new era." Eva kept cleaning, but her ears tuned to every word. By evening, the building was mostly empty. The Halvik's team had left, and Richard had gone home to his penthouse suite, leaving the top floors quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Eva should have clocked out. But instead, she rode the service elevator down to the basement archives. The smell of paper and toner filled the dim room. Here, they processed every document, copied, scanned, or shredded. She approached the industrial shredder and peered inside. Among the strips of destroyed paper, a jam had left a few pages intact. She carefully pulled them free and spread them. Across the metal table, her breath caught. 2 versions of the same contract section. Version A: Titan Tech retained ownership of its intellectual property. Version B: Halvik's gained control of everything. The difference was buried in fine print that most CEOs would never notice. Her mind raced. If Richard signed version B tomorrow, Titan Tech would be finished. Eva snapped a photo of the intact page with her phone and tore off a small fragment of the altered document as proof. Her heart pounded as footsteps echoed in the hallway. The door creaked open. Eva. She looked up to see Emily, Richard's assistant, peering inside. "Just emptying the trash," Eva said quickly. Gesturing to her cleaning cart, Emily hesitated, eyes flicking to the shredder. "Make it quick. I'm locking up in 5. As soon as the door closed, Eva stuffed the fragment into her uniform pocket. Her hands shook as she wheeled her cart to the service exit. She had proof, but who would believe her? That night, in her tiny studio apartment, Eva sat cross-legged on her bed with the small Halvik's laptop Julian had slipped to her. Its screen glowed in the darkness. She tried a few passwords Halvik's Titan Tech merger, but none worked. Then she remembered something Grant Holloway had said in passing during the dinner setup. Project Takeover is right on schedule. Her fingers hesitated, then typed. Project Takeover. The laptop unlocked. For 2 hours. She scrolled through files, presentations, and emails. And then she found a hidden folder labeled PT. Inside were dozens of emails spelling out Halvik's plan. Ensure version B is the signed copy. Once completed, Titan Tech IP transfers immediately. Carlton won't see it coming. Eva covered her mouth, her heart racing. They were staging a corporate heist. One email from Grant chilled her to the bone. The best part is that no one will believe the janitor if she notices anything. Her hands clenched into fists. They saw her as nothing. But tomorrow, she would prove them wrong. Morning sunlight bathed the executive floor in a golden glow. Cameras and journalists filled the boardroom. Crystal glasses and expensive pens lined the table. The air buzzed with excitement. Eva pushed her cleaning cart quietly along the wall, invisible as always. Her eyes darted to the contract on the table version B. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The elevator dinged. Halvik's executives emerged, polished and confident, Grant leading with that infuriating smile. Richard Carlton beamed, shaking hands. "Let's make history," he said, reaching for the pen. The world slowed. Eva wanted to scream, to stop him, but she was just a janitor. Then the boardroom doors opened with a sharp click. Patricia Townsend, Titan Tech's coup, strode in like a storm. Her silver hair glinted under the lights, her tailored suit immaculate. "Richard," she said, voice firm, "do not sign that contract." The room froze. Everyone turned to her as she set a laptop on the table and connected it to the massive screen. Emails flashed onto the display. Grant Holloway's emails. Halvik's betrayal laid bare for all to see. "Make sure version B is the one Carlton signs." Richard's face drained of color. Gasps rippled through the room. Grant's smile faltered, then vanished completely. His eyes swept the room until they locked with Eva's. Realization dawned on. Fury followed. "You," he said quietly, venom in his voice. "The janitor?" For the first time, Richard Carlton truly looked at her. For a heartbeat, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Executives from both companies stared at the giant screen displaying Grant Holloway's damning emails. Cameras from the press event clicked in confusion, unsure if they had just captured the birth of a merger or the death of one. Richard Carlton's hand, still holding the fountain pen, trembled. He turned to Patricia Townsend, his coup, who stood tall and unflinching. "Is this," he began, voice hoarse. "It's real," Patricia said firmly. "Eva Coleman brought it to me. Oh, she found the evidence last night." Richard's gaze snapped to the janitor in the corner. For the first time in years, he saw her not as furniture, not as an invisible presence, but as a human being who had just saved his company. "Eva," he said slowly. Grant Holloway's composure cracked. He slammed a hand on the table, his voice rising. "This is nonsense. Fabricated emails. She's a janitor, for God's sake. Are you going to take her word over mine?" But the evidence on the screen spoke louder than his bluster. Patricia clicked through the emails. Internal Halvik's memos describing project takeover, detailed instructions to swap version A with version B, timelines and confidential strategy notes. Gasps echoed in the boardroom. The press whispered furiously. Cameras flashing. Richard slowly set the pen down. His voice was cold now, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Grant, I think this meeting is over." Security moved in. Julian Parker, the head of security, stepped forward with 2 guards. Grant's associates instinctively backed away as he shouted protests, his confident mask finally shattering. "You can't do this. This is a misunderstanding." You tried to steal my company," Richard snapped, his voice booming. "And you underestimated the only person in this building who was actually paying attention." Grant's eyes darted once more to Eva, who stood frozen, heart pounding. There was rage, humiliation, and disbelief in his gaze. "You," he spat. "A janitor ruined everything." Eva didn't flinch. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. Within an hour, the Halvik's team was escorted out of Titan Tech's tower under security watch. Lawyers swarmed, and journalists flooded the lobby with breaking news alerts. Corporate merger exposed as attempted takeover, insider saves Titan Tech. Eva sat quietly in a small lounge, sipping water with trembling hands. She still wore her gray uniform, her name stitched neatly over the pocket. It all felt surreal. Patricia entered the room with a soft smile. "Eva, you saved this company." Eva shook her head. "I just noticed things. It didn't feel right." "That's what true intelligence looks like," Patricia said. "Noticing what others don't, and courage acting when it would have been easier to stay silent. Richard entered next, his usual arrogance tempered with something near respect. He approached her cautiously, as though seeing her for the first time. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly, "and my company owes you everything." Eva blinked, unsure how to respond. "You ever think about coming back to law, Krisha?" asked, her voice warm. "I think we can find a place for someone with your attention to detail." Eva felt tears sting her eyes. For years, she had been invisible. Tonight, she had not only saved a company, she had saved herself. Weeks later, Eva walked out of Titan Tech Tower not in a janitor's uniform, but in a tailored blazer. She had been offered a position in the company's legal department, working directly under Patricia. The city's skyline glowed in the distance, and for the first time, Eva lifted her chin and smiled. People passed her on the street, none knowing that she had been the one to prevent a billion-dollar betrayal. None knowing that the quiet janitor had outsmarted the giants of the corporate world. As she paused to look back at the gleaming tower, her reflection caught in the glass. Not a ghost, not furniture, a hero.